Alright guys, this is a video that I'm making on how to modify a small Ambassador. This is a 1500C size, and this is how to modify it to be what they call BFS tuned, to where you can effectively cast ultralight lures on this reel. What I have here is I got 3 sections of parts here. This section here is the casting parts that you're going to need. So these will be the parts you need specifically just for casting for the BFS ultralight lures. Then I got this right here, this lot of parts right here, and these parts are going to be your performance improvement. So this is going to make the reel lighter, more ergonomic, make the retrieve speed faster, the drag smoother. That's going to be these parts right here in the middle. And then on the side, on the right here, I have, these are basically just like dress up parts to, these are cosmetic parts here on this side. So these really, I mean, some of these parts, they are lighter than the original for these parts, but really these are mainly just cosmetic parts. Also, a disclaimer about doing this. I'm sure a lot of the Ambassador purists or the collectors are going to be kind of annoyed that I'm doing this to a brand new reel. They probably think it belongs in a glass case, you know, just looking at it. But, you know, I spent a lot of money on this reel, and this was the purpose of me buying this reel, was to modify it for BFS fishing. That's what I like to do. So that's the whole reason I got this reel. I know some people are going to think it should be in a glass case because they're very rare now. They're hard to find. They're extremely expensive, but this was the purpose of me buying this reel. Okay, so now I'm gonna go over each one of these parts and kind of explain them to you, tell you a little bit about them. I have a feeling this is going to be a very long video. The whole process of talking about all these parts and then actually installing all these parts. So just bear with me. Okay, let me move this reel out of the way first. Okay, so let's talk about the casting parts first. You know, the thing about this reel is it's a non-disengage level wind when you cast. Like the level wind doesn't disengage from the rest of the reel. So as you cast, that level wind's still connected, and it still is going back and forth. So you got to think, you know, not only do you have to consider the spool weight like any other BFS reel, you know, you want the lightest spool you can get to make it easiest as you can for casting light lures. But you also have to consider all these other moving parts that move on the cast. I don't want to really say rotational force. I don't know another term for these other parts, but I guess I'll go ahead and say these other parts contribute to the rotational force of the spool when you're casting. So what you want is you want all these moving parts that move on the cast to be as light as possible. Just like you want the spool to be as light as possible, you want all these parts to be as light as possible also. All right, so I'm going to start talking about each one of these parts. The first one, probably the most important, the one that you think of when you're trying to tune a reel to cast as light as you can, is going to be the spool, of course. So, you know, this is just a super shallow, super light spool. I think it's around maybe 5.5 grams, something like that. Now, you're going to be putting parts on the spool, so that's going to add to the spool weight. But yeah, that's just they call it a Veil microcast spool. It's a 1520R, so it's I believe it's 2 millimeters deep. So that's going to be your spool. And then I like to use the you know, you can use either magnetic brakes or you can use the centrifugal brakes. I prefer the magnetic brakes. I believe you can cast, you have a little bit better castability, getting really light, because you don't have the 4-pin or the 2-pin centrifugal brake hub on the spool. So this eliminates some of the weight from the spool by using the magnetic brakes. So that's what this is. You can adjust it. See, they got some magnets in there, but you can you stick the magnets around the outer circumference of this brake hub, and it interacts with the inside of the spool. And you could put different size magnets and different positions to adjust the magnetic brake force, basically. Okay, next you got, I'm going to use the Avail terms. They call this a cog wheel. You know, this connects your spool to your level line. This is one of the parts that does. Now, if you look at the original, I don't have an original with me right now. It's inside the reel, but the original, this is a solid piece. You know, this is a solid gear, but you see this one has a lot of cutouts to eliminate a lot of the weight. So this is like an ultralight version of the original. They did as much as they could to make it as light as possible, but they also added 2 ball bearings to the center of it to decrease some of the friction, which the original does not have ball bearings. It's just a hole through the center of it, and it's basically it's spinning on plastic. So you're going to need this part. I put this part here. This is another, what they call a cog wheel, a different, see the part number. I don't know where the part, 10255. Really, I don't think this part's any different than the original, other than the color. Like you can use the same, you can choose the same color as your reel or whatever. You're never going to see it, but I mean, if you have the choice of choosing whatever color you want, why not just match the reel? But I don't believe this is any lighter than the original, but I put it with the casting parts because it goes on the spool, so it's part of the casting system. Okay, then here, this is can't really see it. This is the spring that goes on the spool shaft. These are the Avail ones. They're basically the same as the original. I think they might be slightly softer and like barely, like you wouldn't even notice the difference in weight, but they might be a little lighter. I think I weighed these in grains and I could kind of see a tad bit difference from the original in weight. But again, this really isn't much different from the original, but I put this in here because it goes on the spool also. Okay, then this is a ceramic pawl that goes in the level wind. Now you can use this, or you can use a steel one. I've heard people say they don't like using the ceramic one because it can damage the level wind gear, the worm gear. I haven't had any problems with it, but the ceramic one is almost like half the weight of the steel one, the original one. So that helps a little bit with casting. Like I said, you want all these parts as light as possible. So wherever you can lose some weight with the parts, I do it anyway. So that's another part I'm going to use. Then you have, this is the level line itself. This is an ultralight version of the original. I think it weighs about 1/3 as much as the original level line that comes on the reel. So you need that. And then this is a 2 ball bearing level wind worm gear, and it comes with the tube. I don't know what you call it. But this is made of, the worm gear is made out of aluminum. So it weighs, I think, half as much as the original. And then also the good thing about this is it has, on either end of it, it has a ball bearing. So this is a 2 ball bearing aluminum ultra lightweight worm gear for the level wind. So you're going to need that. And then of course, these are aftermarket hybrid ceramic micro ball bearings. These are the Hedgehog, I can't even say, it's Korobi or something. I can't even say it, but I think these are the best best ones that Hedgehog sells off their website. So, you know, the original ball bearings are just standard ball bearings. They're steel. I believe they got steel balls in them. They're pretty heavy. So these will also help improve your casting for ultralight lures. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the center lot of parts. These are your parts just for improving the performance. These parts will make your reel lighter also, a pretty good bit lighter. So let me talk about these parts in the middle. This one, okay, this is a ultralight aluminum frame for the reel, but also it says 7.5. Also, the reel foot, they pushed it up into the reel so that the reel is actually going to sit much lower on your rod. It's like an offset. Instead of being flush with the bottom of the side plates, it's pushed up in there. So like I said, your reel's going to sit a lot lower. It's going to have better ergonomics, and it's also way lighter than the original frames. So that's that part. This handle, really, this is I hate to say the guy's name because I can't pronounce it right. It's Simon something. They call him Mr. Ambassador. I believe this is a handle that he sells, and it's just a 2-knob handle. It's in red. It's kind of a dark red. Really, the only thing this improves is it has 2 knobs on it. So I mean, it's just easier to get a hold of the handle once you start retrieving than it is the single knob counterbalance handle. Then you have this. This is what they call the main gear bushing. This is a aluminum lightweight version of the original. The nice thing about this is it has 4 pins on the bottom, so it's only going to take a quarter turn to engage the reel back, to engage the spool back for a retrieve. It'll only take a quarter turn, which I believe on this particular reel, the original also has 4 pins, so it's the same. But some of the older models, I think that they only have 2 pins, or a lot of them only have 1 pin, so you might have to make a whole turn to engage the spool back for your retrieve. Whereas if you use this, you cut it down to a quarter turn. But like I said, it's also aluminum, so this is going to lighten up your reel. You're going to have your Carbonex drag washers. I don't think this comes in the original reel. I think it's a different material. This is just gonna make the drag smoother, I think, than the original drag washers. So that's all that is. This is the aluminum, I think they call it a click plate. It's a plate that goes down on top of your drag washers. Probably can't see it. It has grooves in the bottom of it for the clicking drag system they use. But this is also aluminum, so it's also much lighter than the original, and it'll lighten up your reel. Then you have this part. It's called I think a ball bearing bushing kit. It's this is where your pinion gear goes in, the shaft of your pinion gear. Normally what they have in the original is just a plastic bushing, and it doesn't have a ball bearing, so this is going to make it a little bit smoother because now you have a ball bearing that your pinion gear is spinning inside of. Also, it has a bigger spring. It might be a little bit softer, so it might be easier to push your button in whenever you cast. So that's what that part's for. And then I think the most important part out of this lot, as far as performance improving, is going to be your high-speed gear set. The original gears in this reel it's 5:3:1 for this particular model. Some of the older ones I think are 4.7:1. And on top of the slow gear ratio, the spool diameter is very small. So the combination of slow gear ratio and small diameter spool is going to make your retrieve, your pickup, how much line you pick up is going to be very slow. I think the 5.3 to 1 might be like 18 inches per handle turn, which by modern day standards is ridiculously slow, and it can be hard to fish with, especially in fast moving streams like trout streams. You might want to fish this reel in. So to me, this is the biggest thing you need as far as performance improving is this high speed gear set. This is a Vail gear set. It's a 6.1 to 1 gear ratio. I think it brings the inch per turn up from 18 to like 22 or 23, which isn't, it's still very slow compared to modern day reels, but it is a huge improvement and it makes it a lot easier to fish with. And you can get these in brass or aluminum. This one's brass. I like brass. I think they're smoother. I might be wrong, but that's just what I think. All right, so the last lot of parts I'm going to talk about is over here. These are your cosmetic or dress-up parts. You could almost say that this is a performance improvement part because it's so much lighter than the original. It lightens your reel up. That's not really why I bought it. I mainly bought it as a cosmetic part. It's red and the reel's red, so that's why I bought it. You got that's your drag star. Then you got your handle nut retainer. It's just a red part. I bought it because it matches the reel. And then you got this. This is a Valley Hill push button. You know, this is what you push to disengage the reel so you could cast. But this one has it's hard to see, but it has a metal actual button part where your thumb makes contact with it. But that's really the only difference between this and the original is that metal button on top. This really doesn't improve your reel any. This is just a cosmetic part like these other two. So the next thing I would do normally whenever I go to tune one of these reels, I would take the reel apart and clean everything first. There's going to be old grease and old oil in there. I'm just going to go ahead and clean everything up. Then after that, I would probably take all these parts right here. What I normally do is take the ball bearings off all these parts that have ball bearings, and I would soak them in acetone for a couple of hours to get all the oil out of them so that I can put the amount of oil that I want into them. So that's going to be the next thing I do. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, I pulled all the bearings out from these parts. You had two that were in this cog wheel. And all these parts, they're just pressed in. You know, there's a recessed area in there for a bearing on either side. You just pull them out with like one of these, I don't know. I think this is a spool cap puller. I can pull bearings with it. So you had two in here. I pulled the one out of this, the bushing for the pinion gear. They had a ball bearing in there. It was just pressed in there too. And then the thing with the level line gear, the worm gear, it has a bearing on this side and it has a bearing on this side too, but the one on this side, you can't really get it off of there. I mean, I've seen people, this gear is like pressed onto that shaft, and I don't want to take the chance of tearing it up trying to get that gear off. But so I don't really mess with this ball bearing. I guess if I really wanted to, I would try to pull that gear off the this worm gear. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave it like it is, and I'm not worried about that one. And then here's your spool bearings right here. So I'm just going to put these in acetone for a couple hours and get all the oil out of them. All right, guys, while the bearings are soaking in the acetone, I'm going to go ahead and start taking the reel apart and cleaning out the oil and grease. I think for the rest of this video, I'm going to have to turn this camera around so that I can actually work on the reel. So hopefully y'all can see what I'm doing. I know it's not ideal conditions. The lighting isn't that great and the camera position isn't that great, but I'm going to try to do the best that I can. Does have some old oil on it, as expected. You gotta be careful with the brakes. They have these tiny little brake blocks on these two pins, so you don't want to lose that when you're disassembling this reel. I'm trying to remember to try to keep this reel in the center of focus so y'all can see, but I might be moving it around a lot too. You definitely need to take the handle off before you take the brake plate away from the side plate. Almost forgot to do that. So you got an E-clip holding the main gear bushing onto the shaft right here. You got to remove that. It's kind of a pain in the butt to remove this. Got your handle. Friction washer. Drag star. At this point, you can separate the brake plate. This is the brake plate, this chrome piece. Separate that from the side plate. You got two screws here and here. It's actually very hard to try to do this and keep it in frame. Especially without scratching anything. Now you can separate, you can take the side plate off from the brake plate. So y'all look. So you got your anti-reverse sleeve inside of there. Looks like you got a copper shim on this side. Got two copper shims on this side. Just two of them. So you're not going to need this. You're not going to need the anti-reverse sleeve that's in there. You're going to use the aftermarket one from Avail. So you remove that. There's the plastic bushing for your pinion gear. You're not going to need that either. You're going to replace that with that ball bearing part. Make it real smoother. So I'm going to remove that. It has a like almost like a bearing retaining clip in there holding that in. It's just a wire clip. I'll try to take that out. Of course, you want to be careful to not let this clip go flying across the room. I think the first time I ever took one of these apart, I lost one of these clips. It was actually for the ball bearing, but this is basically the same clip, except I think the wire's a little bit thicker on it. That holds in that bushing for the pinion gear. So I'm going to remove that plastic bushing. So it has a spring underneath it. Take that out. You're not going to use a spring either, so you don't need either one of these parts. So now I'm just going to clean up this side plate. It's got some grease inside of it. Okay, now normally I would either take some 99.9% alcohol or some kind of solvent, and I would actually clean this out a whole lot better, more thoroughly. I would clean both sides of the plate and everything, but for the sake of this video, the length of this video is going to be, I'm just going to kind of do a quick wipe the grease off of these parts. So next I'm going to take this palming side plate off the reel. And I have this little part, so like a little screwdriver that Avail makes specifically for these small Ambassadors. You don't need this part to do this, but I mean, it's kind of nice. So this small end is for these screws on the palming side plate. Now you want to put as little amount of pressure as you can to unscrew these screws so you don't kind of damage them any. All right, let's look at this part. Like I said, I'm telling you earlier about that aftermarket cog wheel. It has all those cutouts to lighten it up, and it also has ball bearings. See, this one's much heavier and doesn't have ball bearings. This is that other cog wheel, or I guess cog gear, that's what they call it. Stock, it fits inside of this plastic sleeve thing, and it goes in this hole right here. So this is how it goes stock. That's how it's going to come if your reel's new and not put together with a bunch of parts. It's going to be like this. But really, this part, this plastic sleeve that it goes in, you don't need this part when you're using the Vail microcast spool. You can eliminate. This actually causes a little bit of friction because this cog wheel has to turn inside of here. It causes a little bit of friction, but it's unnecessary. So this part you're not going to use. So you get rid of that. You just need this and this. Well, the aftermarket parts for each of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this cog wheel off. Okay, that went flying for a second. You gotta be careful not to let this go flying across the room where you'll never find it again. So now you can take your cog wheel off. See, it doesn't have the ball bearings like the aftermarket part does. And it's heavier too. It doesn't have all those cutouts in it. Alright. So this side, this plate that the gears and all this is affixed to is called a brake plate. That's on the handle side of the reel. I believe this side is called the, it also has a plate for this side on the palm. I think it's called the palming side plate, maybe. Not 100% sure on the name of it. It's got a bunch of old oil on it, you can see. I'm cleaning all this oil off. This actually might be called a bearing plate. I think that's what they call it, a bearing plate. It's on the palming side of the reel. Now let's talk about the frame, the level line. Something that I really don't like about these reels, I'm not sure why they haven't ever tried to improve this. There's a plastic clasp. When you push the worm gear into the level line tube right here, this plastic clasp right here, it catches. That's what holds the worm gear in. And that clasp, those two little clips right there, they break so easy. Like it's so easy to break those, and then I don't think you can really use the worm gear after that. I'm not sure if I was an aftermarket company and I was making this part, I think the first thing I would do is change out this plastic clasp for like a metal clasp, so you wouldn't have all these breakages. Like it's really common for that clasp, those two clips to break on it. In this case, with this reel, there's no reason for me to disassemble this part here. And all you're going to do is, if you do just disassemble that, all you're going to do is risk breaking these plastic clasps. So I'm just going to leave this part like it is. So that, like I said, there's no reason to take all this apart. So I'm just gonna store it all together as one part so I don't risk breaking that. All right, you got your, I don't know, they call it different names. I've heard push arm, push button, this right here. You got that on there. It's all plastic. Something else I don't really like. The whole thing's made out of plastic, like all of it. So you got your main gear bushing. You got your click plate, your main gear, your pinion gear. And you got your drag washers below this click plate and below the main gear. And you probably got a copper shim. I don't know if you can see it. There's a copper shim at the bottom of this post. That's pretty much it for this. So I'm gonna take these gears and this stuff off of here because you're not gonna use it. You're gonna be using your high-speed gears. You're not gonna use these gears. You're not gonna use this main bushing either. So you can take all this off. See? You're not even going to use the drag washers either that are in there, so you can just leave all this together. See, this is a 4-pin. So this is the same as the veil part. I guess the only difference would be the veil main gear bushing is lighter than this one. That's about it. These reels are like really simple reels. They don't have nearly as many parts as like a modern reel. So, I mean, once you take one of these apart a few times, you could probably do all this blindfolded. It's like so simple. That's your brass shim. Here's the bottom of the post. You are going to need that. So this part here, this push arm, push button, whatever, I'm going to try to replace it with the Valley Hill DX push button. I was able to use that aftermarket push arm on another reel and it worked all right, but it seems like the one that doesn't have the instant in reverse, like it didn't seem to work on that reel. So this one does have the instant in reverse, so I'm going to try to use it, but if I can't use it, then I guess I'm just going to have to use this stock one. So let me remove this push button. Okay. Kind of just these inner claw looking things, these inner things, you kind of pull those apart and then you just slide it back. And it's got that spring. You definitely gonna need this spring right here. Alright, it's pretty clean. I got all the grease off of it anyways. The next thing you want to do, you're not going to use these bearings, so you got to pull these bearings out of these two plates. And it's held in by just a bearing retaining clip. Kind of looks different than like a modern one. It's more of just like a circle or like a C or something. It fits in a groove in there. So I'm going to pull these two bearings out of these two plates. Okay, I got the clip out. Be careful with these clips because the bearing retaining clip, which is this one, is a thinner wire than the clip that holds in the pinion gear bushing. So don't confuse those two. So the thinner one is for the bearings. you can pull the bearing out. This falls right out. All right, that one came out easier. You just push the bearing out. So these are the main parts that you're gonna need, and all of them are cleaned up pretty good, pretty decent. Got all the grease off of them. So from here, I'm gonna wait for the ball bearings to finish soaking in the acetone. And after that, I'm going to start assembling the reel with all the new aftermarket parts in it. Actually, the first thing I need to do while I'm still waiting is put the new push button on the brake plate. So what I'm going to do is put some grease. I'm going to put some grease on that push arm, push button, whatever. I'm going to put it onto this brake plate. So here is the Valley Hill push button, Valley Hill DX push button, I think is what they call it. And it has a metal button on it, unlike the original that is completely plastic. So really all this is for, this is like cosmetic part. Just looks nicer having a chrome metal button. That's all. That's the only difference. But I did notice that these arms on this aftermarket one seem to be thicker. They seem to be thicker, maybe not. They seem like they were thicker on the other reel that I was putting together, and that was interfering with the main gear bushing on the reel that didn't have the anti-reverse in it, which is why it wouldn't work. But this bushing, it seems like it sits up a little bit higher. I think it might sit up a little bit higher on the brake plate, so there's more room for this thicker arms to fit underneath it. That's what I think. I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some grease on this and put it on the brake plate. You're gonna want to put grease everywhere on this arm that's going to interact with either the brake plate or the pins, or where it locks in place here. I want to put grease almost all over this. So I pretty much got everything that I think. Now the pinion yoke is going to ride on top of this push arm right here, so I'm going to need to put some grease there. But I think the bottom of it's pretty much covered, and the inside of it's covered. So now I'm going to attach this, put a little bit more. I probably put way too much on here too. You don't have to put this much. I'm just trying to do the best I can for this video. Alright, let me try to put this back together. Alright, there's a right way to do this, but I don't know. I'm gonna just try to do the best I can. This spring's kind of a big pain in the butt. Okay. I think you're supposed to use some Okay. Springs in there. So I'm going to push this back and forth a few times to get grease all over, or it's going to be touching that. So when you put your new bearing in there, you gotta be careful with how much grease you have on your pinion gear, because that grease from the pinion gear could get into that bearing and then slow it down. So that's something that could happen if you got like a lot of grease on it. You don't want that to happen. Okay, so the next thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the high-speed gear set in here, and the main gear bushing on here. Now, I think most people are going to put grease on this post, but I like for the rotation of the handle to be as light as possible. So I'm just going to use like a heavy oil and put on this post here. All right, this is kind of important. You got your main gear bushing in the bag. That's the main thing in the bag. But make sure you do not throw the bag away, because it has this Teflon washer that comes in the bag, and you need that with this aluminum bushing. And that is because if you look at the original main gear bushing, it has like a spacer. It's not really a spacer, it's just part of the bottom of it built in on it. But this aftermarket part does not have that, so you will need that Teflon washer to take up that space. And a lot of people forget to put this on here, and I think maybe it could possibly you know, your pinion gear and your main gear isn't going to be lined up the same way without that washer. So you're going to want to put that on there. But first I'm going to put that brass washer back on the bottom of the post after I clean it. I'm going to put some on the bottom of the post for the brass shim. It's on there. I'm going to put some oil on the post also for the main gear bushing. Alright, put your main gear bushing on your post. Let me look at this for a minute, guys. Okay, see, I made the mistake that not everybody, but a lot of people forgot to put this Teflon washer on here, and I was wondering why the main gear bushing was making contact with this, and it's because that Teflon washer wasn't on there. I'm going to put a little oil for the Teflon washer. Hopefully now it doesn't make contact. Yeah, see, there's a gap in there now. And really, when you're putting all these parts together, you might have to take them apart and look at them and see like if something's binding up, if something's not right. You're probably not just going to throw all this together on the first try and everything work perfect. All right, of course, the next thing that goes on there is drag washer. So the smaller one, of course, goes next. Put some grease. I put a lot of grease on these drag washers because I want the drag pressure to be really, really light. And that's because the pinion gear of the high-speed gear set is very weak and delicate, and you can damage or break that pinion gear very easy. So you want your drag pressure to be very, very light. Some people use other materials, maybe like a Teflon washer or something. I don't know, this is what I have. I think this is smoother than the Teflon washer. Put it on here without getting grease everywhere. All right, that's on there. So next you need your main gear of your high-speed gear set. This is your main gear. Very beautiful brass gear, tiny little teeth. Has this kind of like a spring almost. That's for your clicking drag. So put this on next. I have grease on the main gear, and I'm going to put it onto the main gear bushing. All right. Okay, you put your drag washer on there. Kind of center it. So this is the bottom of the click plate. That's why it's called a click plate. This is your clicking drag. This is how it works. That spring, I'm trying to show you. That spring that's sitting up right there, you can see it better this way. It's kind of protruding up. As it turns, it clicks in these grooves, makes a clicking sound. It's for your click and drag. Put this on here. All right. So here's your pinion gear. As you can see how tiny it is. So anyways, these two, this here and this here on this side, it's very thin, and it could be damaged because it's so thin that something happens, like too much drag pressure. When it turns, it could spread these open. It's like the most common thing to happen is those two things spread open, and then it won't. Then the pinion gear won't grip the spool. It won't grip the spool anymore. Let me show you the spool real quick. So here's your spool. The pinion gear. See how the spool is shaped? That's how it grips the spool. It's kind of a weird looking pinion gear. But if too much drag force is put on this pinion gear, it could spread that open, and then it won't grip the spool anymore, and then you're screwed. You got to buy a new pinion gear. I guess you could try to push it back together, but then it's probably going to be weak and it might break at some point. I would just get a new pinion gear. Okay. To the side for a minute. Here's your pinion gear yoke. See these bevel edges? When you put this pinion gear in, this pinion gear yoke in, you want to make sure these beveled edges are pointing downward. Okay, the pinion gear is going to fit in that right there. So you want this, the beveled edges right here. See them? You want that pointing down. All right. Beveled edges of the pannier yoke down. So this all goes downward. This goes down when you fit it in there. All right. So you can see how that fits in there. Put these brass shims back on here. You know what I just realized? They sent me the wrong click plate. This click plate is supposed to, for the instant anti-reverse, this click plate is supposed to have an integrated anti-reverse sleeve in it. This is the click plate for the anti-reverse. So I'm gonna have to get another one. I mean, this one will still work fine, but I want the click plate with the integrated anti-reverse sleeve. So I'm gonna have to use that anti-reverse sleeve, the original, on here. Alright, so I'm gonna have to use this original. I didn't want to use this, but it is what it is. I'm gonna have to get another one of these parts. Got the wrong part. So I'm gonna start putting the bearings back in the parts that I took them from. So let me move this. Alright, I have this cog wheel. Put 2 bearings in this cog wheel. You just press them in there. Just press it. There goes one. The other one on the back side. Then you got the pinion bushing ball bearing kit, they call it. This small bearing goes in here. Just press it in there, that's all it is. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this ball bearing bushing for the pinion gear. I'm going to put that into the side plate. Put some oil in here. It's in there upside down. Put this in there next. Actually, got to put the spring in there next. Spring on here first. It's easiest to just do it like this. Sometimes you have to keep turning it until it's in a position where it'll go in. It kept getting hung up on the edge. But now you want to kind of work this thing in and out to get oil on it so it'll slide better. Now make sure this is a bearing clip. This is for a ball bearing for the spool bearings. Do not use the bearing clip. You can get confused. Look at it. It's different sizes though. The one for the pinion bushing is smaller, and the wire is a heavier gauge, a thicker gauge. So that's the one that goes for the pinion bushing is a smaller, thicker gauged wire. Let's see, I've got something better to push. This will work better. Just might pull the ball bearing out there. Yeah, this works a lot better. So you make sure that that retaining clip is in there in the slot. See, there's a slot for it. You can't really see on camera, but all right, so that's in there. So now you can put the side plate back onto the brake plate. All these parts are on here. So you go ahead and put that on there. Actually, first I want to turn this a few times to see if any excess grease is on the gears, because I do not want a bunch of grease on these gears, just enough. Because what happens if you put too much grease on here, it'll start working its way down the pinion gear, and then it'll get into the bearing that's underneath the pinion gear. Then you'll have a slow bearing and it won't cast as good. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on here, try to do it on camera. Alright, so it went on there fine. Now you put your two screws, brake plate screws back in here. Alright, so that's together. Now you can put the new drag star on this part. Actually, I gotta put these drag, I don't know, I forgot what they call these. I used to know what they were called, but I forgot. I think they're like pressure washers for the drag, maybe. I don't know. Somebody told me that they call them like chips, like potato chips or something. Anyways, of course, you put them opposing each other. Alright, that's on there. Next thing you do is put the drag star on. Alright, get your drag star on. Don't cross thread it. Alright, now you hear that? It's because that click plate isn't pressed all the way down, because that spring is holding that click plate up, so I think it's probably rubbing the inside of the side plate. So I'm just going to put this handle on it real quick so I can tighten this down. Friction washer. So you put your friction washer on there. Then I'm going to use, I got a different handle I was going to use, an Avail handle, which had ball bearings and the knob, so it's like a lot nicer than this. It's just knobs that are permanently mounted on the pins. This one matches the color a little bit better, but if you want one that actually performs better, I would get the Avail with the ball bearings in it. See if this thing will even go on here. It might not even work. Alright, the handle's on there. Now I'm going to put the E-clip back on to the post. Okay, that's on there. Alright, put on the handle nut retainer. Alright, so now you got the entire, well, not the entire, you don't have the bearing in there yet. This is a bearing, one side is open, the other side is not. Now, I put the side open out so that I could put oil in it without having to take the bearing out or take all this apart. And I don't know, some people might be like, oh, don't do that. Makes it easier for trash to get in there because it's more exposed. But that's just how I do it. So. Alright, so the bearing's in there and it's seated all the way in. Alright, so that went in easy. Put a drop of oil in the bearing. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the frame, take the frame out. All right, here's your frame. You see how the real foot is pushed up so it can sit lower on your rod. Actually, I have another, well actually I have this one from the reel. Okay, so you can see that this frame, the reel is going to sit much lower than the original. It's made out of aluminum, so it's a hell of a lot lighter than the original frame. This actually reduces a lot of weight from the reel, just this frame right here. So next thing I'm going to do is put the level wind into the frame. Now, this right here, you got a lot of stuff going on when you put all this together. It's going to be kind of hard to do this on camera. You got to take your level wind. Alright, you got the level wind, you got the pipe to the level wind wire in the frame of the reel at the top, and then it's kind of a lot of stuff to do at the same time. Okay, and then you got the end of the pipe. Now you can hold it this way and it won't fall apart on you. The worm gear in there. See, I already messed up. Alright, let me take this back out. Alright, don't turn this thing over. Once you got it like that, don't turn it over because that's just going to keep falling out. Just do this like this. and just snaps these two, the clasp, you can see these two little clips just snap into place. Next thing I'm gonna do is put that ceramic pawl into the level line. You can see not only is it made out of ceramic, but it's also has some material removed to make it even lighter. Put a little bit of oil on the blade. It's a lot of oil actually. Alright, the oil, you want the oil just to get all over the whole thing because it's got to turn back and forth inside of there. So just get oil all over the whole level line pawl is in there and it's seated. Put some oil or grease or whatever you want to put on the worm gear. So you can put your level line cap back on. Alright. So it's not binding up, it's moving back and forth. I'm going to take palming side plate and put the cog wheel in it. Now, with the cog wheel comes a couple little, they're like plastic shims. I wish they would send you metal stuff, but they give you these little flimsy, junky plastic shims to shim the worm gear. Look at that. So they give you, because there might be a little bit of little gap. I'm looking at it. It doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of space. I might not have to use the shims. Alright, y'all. Put a shim in the bottom of the post and then put the cog wheel on. And now there's very, very little play at all. Alright, so that's done. Alright, y'all. The next thing is the other spool bearing on the other side of the spool. Normally, you would put it in here in the bearing, the hole for the bearing, put the clip in, but you're not going to do that. You're going to put the bearing onto the spool itself. But first, you need a spring on the spool. Here's a spool shaft spring. This is a Vail one. There's probably absolutely no difference between this and the original. I'm going to put it on this side. This side's for the pinion gear. This side right here is where you're going to put this spring. And you just push it on all the way. It's on there. Next thing you're going to do is put your spool bearing on there. I'm going to have the open part facing away so I can put oil in it again. Okay, so you got that spring and the bearing. And here is the cog gear, cog wheel mod, whatever you want to call it. Now, if you remember, in the stock reel, that this gear is inside this plastic sleeve. But we want to get rid of this plastic sleeve because it causes friction with this gear. So we're going to eliminate this piece. And we're going to put the cog gear onto the spool. The spool is made to affix this gear onto the spool shaft. Now if you look close, you can see there that it's they got like a groove there. That groove is for another E-clip. Put the E-clip on there, and that's what holds this gear on. But we're not going to use this. We're going to use the red one that I bought for the reel. That's the original right there. Alright, so I'm going to put that on the spool shaft. That's how it goes. You can see this side goes onto there. That's the direction you put it on. Now, this is very important too. In the package your spool comes in, there's another Ziploc behind the spool that has the E-clip that holds that gear onto the spool shaft. So make sure you find this. Don't throw this. Don't just take the spool out and throw this in the trash, because I've done that before I knew that this clip was in here. So then you got to pay $25 shipping to get this freaking clip. You don't want to do that. So make sure you don't throw that away. This goes to that groove right there. Trying to do this on camera. Alright, so now this gear is affixed to the spool shaft, and this part has now been eliminated. You don't need this anymore. Now on this side of the spool goes a plastic collar that comes with the magnetic braking hub. See it right there, that white collar. You need that for the spool. So that collar takes up the space that the centrifugal brake thing normally would. See how it comes off of it? So you need something to take up the space on this. If you're not going to use the centrifugal brakes, you need this collar to take up that space. So you put this, I always put these slots going towards the center of the spool. I don't know if it matters. So that's on there. I'm going to put the palm and side plate onto the frame. All right, here, this is going to be a big controversy. You got the cog wheel, you got the level line. Normally, people would probably put grease on these two gears, especially considering this one's plastic. So it's probably going to wear a lot faster than a metal gear would. But I have put grease on there before. I've put semi-fluid grease on there before, trying to get the lightest grease I could so this moves as fast as I could, as fast as it can, freely as it can, because that's going to help with casting lighter baits. So I've put grease, semi-fluid grease on there, and I've put heavy oil on there. And you know what? I ended up just taking all that off and just running it dry. And I know people are going to be like, oh man, you're going to wear out that cog wheel like really fast like that. But you know what else? I've been fishing with some of my other reels modded like this over a year, and when I came and looked at the gear, this plastic gear, I didn't see any wear on it. Even without grease on there, I didn't see any wear. So I don't know how long it would take that to wear out. But shit, if it takes a year to wear out, I think it's worth it. But it doesn't. It takes longer than that because my reels are older than a year and they haven't shown any sign of wear yet. So if you want to put grease on there, I mean, it seems like the right thing to do to put grease on here. If you want to put oil on there, do whatever you want. This is just the way that I do it, even though people are going to be like, oh, that's stupid. Oh, well, it's just what I do. Okay, so now all you have to do is put your bearing plate, or I think that's what they call this, onto the frame. All right. And then you put your side plate back on. See if I can get it on there. See something here. Something's not fitting right. Okay, it's the level wind is holding the plate up. All right, let me look at this off camera so I can figure out what the problem is. All right, y'all. The problem is this black collar around here is hanging up this plate from going all the way down. I think if this happens, you're supposed to take some fingernail clippers and cut some of the edge off of that black collar so that you can fit the plate on there, but I'm not going to do that. I haven't. This right here is an Avail bearing plate from another reel, so I'm just going to use this because this fits on there. And I'll just buy another one of these from other reel. Just make everything a lot easier just to use this plate. See, it has a lot of cutouts and stuff. It's really not that much lighter than the original. You think it would be way lighter, but it really isn't that much lighter than this one. But it's an Avail part, so it fits better with this Avail level wind. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on. Now you see this plate fits flush against the frame now. So now I'm going to put the side plate on. Now it fits perfect. Fits flush all the way around. Now I'm going to screw it on. I don't even like using screwdrivers on these screws. I mean, you got to, but I try to hand screw it as much as I can. All right. Palm and side plate is now on the reel. All right, I'm gonna put a spool in there real quick just to check it. Make sure the level line works. I got it. Now you could pretty much kind of fit this stuff together now to see how it's going to fit. Put the spool in here. I'm going to loosen this up a little bit so there's space. All right. See how this reel fits on this frame. Now, fit good, fits nice. Tighten up your thumb screws a little bit. So it's pretty much complete except for the magnet hub. So that's what it looks like now. It's got the nice metal button here. All right, I'm going to put the magnet hub in there now. Show y'all how to put that in there. Here's the magnet hub. It's got magnets in it. Stuck in there right now. Try to get them out. I think these are 4mm long magnets, and it comes with 4 of them. But if you really want to fine tune this thing, you need to get a bunch of different size magnets, and at least like 3 or 4 of each size. I think they sell a 2mm, a 3mm, a 3.5mm, and then this is a 4mm. So I just got a whole bunch of different sizes, and got a few of each one. So let me get this other one. So this is my black Ambassador right here. It's the magnetic hub right here on it. It just presses onto there. Presses onto this ring right here that the bearing fits into. Now you see I have a bunch of different size magnets, and I have them placed differently. Now I probably spent 3 or 4 hours tuning this brake. I tried different size magnets, next to different size magnets, position them farther away from each other, closer to each other, just like every kind of configuration of all the size magnets and all the positions that I could think of to fine tune this brake hub to how it is now. And I've cast down to 1.85 grams with a Ambassador 1500C, and it can cast 1.58 grams very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with this configuration that I already know works well for what I'm casting, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same for this reel, and that'll be like my starting point. It might not be exactly the same as the other reel, so I might have to change a couple things, but that's how I'm going to start. I'm going to start with the same magnet configuration as this one for that black reel. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to show you how to put the magnetic hub into the reel. So you loosen your thumb screws. Now, like I said, this magnet presses onto that ring. Whenever you look at this magnetic hub, some of the space doesn't have holes for magnets, but then like 2/3 of it does. So I always put the 2/3 of it facing me, so it's just easier to put magnets in and out. Something else I do is I'll put like some oil or some grease on either this edge here or this edge here to make it slide on better, because it might take a little bit of force. You don't want to push so hard that you're going to mess something up. So if you put a little bit of lubrication on there, it'll slide onto that ring easier. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to put it around. You don't want to get it into the bearing. And you just press it on there. So it's on there all the way now. Fits inside of the spool, of course. Gotta turn the handle a little bit for the pinion gear to sit onto the spool. Something else you might see a video. I got a guy, his name's Goober Realworks, and I think this is like his full-time job, is like cleaning reels, mainly Ambassadors, and he'll tune them like this. He'll put all these tuning parts on them. But you'll see his videos and he'll do this with it. And that thing will go back and forth for like for like 2 or 3 minutes, it seems. And then you put one of these reels together and it doesn't do that. Well, he cleaned all the bearings and he cleaned everything on it, and he did not, whenever he does that test thing, he doesn't have any oil or anything on any of the bearings. So don't let that make you think that, oh, you're not doing a good job because it's not going back and forth a lot. Like I said, he doesn't have any oil on the bearings and stuff when he does that, so it just spins forever. But anyways, so move all this out of the way. So this is pretty much the finished product. Of course, I got to add the magnets to the magnetic hub. And I might do another video of me. I'll probably do a video of me fishing with the reel and casting it. But yeah, came out pretty good. I like it. So that's about it. I hope y'all enjoyed this very long, very boring video from somebody that's monotone and doesn't speak very loud. I'm not really set up to do this. Is the first time I ever did a video like this of working on a reel or cleaning a reel or whatever, so I'm not really set up to do this. I did the best I could. I know a lot of the time I had the reel out of the frame, the camera frame, but anyways, I hope y'all enjoyed that. Thank y'all.